Well, thank you so much, Jessica, and I thank all of you for taking time out of your day, as many of you do each and every Thursday at noon, to join us for the NYGOP Video Town Hall Series. This has been an extraordinarily successful way for us to communicate in this time of COVID, where people are separate. We can't have the in-person events. We have brought Republican leaders from around the state to you, to your office, to your living room, to talk about what's going on in the Republican Party, give our perspective on the deficiencies that one party control by the Democrat Party has brought to us in Albany and across New York State. And I will say it was great to be back in Rochester yesterday with our 2020 slate of Republican candidates representing Monroe County and the Finger Lakes. Those individuals decided to run because they care about our country and our state. They couldn't sit back any longer while the extreme left pushes an agenda that's so dangerously wrong for New Yorkers. And whether it's in Washington, D.C. with AOC, or in her team looking to fundamentally dismantle the United States of America. Now, mind you, that's their own words, not mine. They want to dismantle the United States. Or in Albany with the radical New York City Democrats controlling the New York State. We need a return to sanity and balance in our government. One-party Democrat rule has been nothing short of an unmitigated disaster in the over 1 year that they have run Albany unbridled. Our public safety is threatened like never before. Violent crime is way up across New York, and every week we're reading headlines of multiple shootings, stabbings, and robberies in every part of the state. And make no mistake, the surge in this crime is the direct result of the policies that have neutered law enforcement. Our men and women in uniform are now the ones wearing handcuffs as the criminals walk free. And it's the result of the elimination of cash bail that's put criminals right back on the street. And what's the governor done to address this? Nothing. He's too busy selling his self-promotional pandemic poster or taking vanity trips to Georgia on your dime. And that is what you call a great segue to introducing today's guest. Because when it comes to criticizing Governor Cuomo and what he's done during this period, it's hard to hold a candle to our guest today, Rensselaer County Executive Steve McLaughlin. Steve represented the 107th District in the New York State Assembly from 2011 to 2017. And that includes parts of Albany, Columbia, Greene, and Rensselaer County in New York's capital region. As state assemblyman, Steve earned a reputation for his work to improve quality of life in upstate New York, being a fierce voice for reform in Albany, imposing infringements on our constitutional rights of state residents, including the New York SAFE Act. In 2017, he took a different path of public service and was elected Rensselaer County Executive, where he has become an advocate for his county, for all of upstate, and he is one of Governor Cuomo's most vocal opponents. Welcome, County Executive Steve McLaughlin.
Thank you, Chairman. No, that's a very nice introduction, and I'm pleased to be here. I'm thrilled to be here. It's going to be good to spend some time with everybody, and I appreciate everybody that's joining us. And you did just a perfect job of encapsulating what's going on. And you think about, you talked about AOC, how they're now openly talking about dismantling America, but 8 or 12 short years ago when Barack Obama was running, he talked about fundamentally changing. They've now gone from fundamentally changing a nation that really is, we all know, the greatest nation to ever exist. They've gone from trying to fundamentally change the best nation ever to now fundamentally trying to dismantle it. That's how dangerous this current crop of people is. And you just talked about my opposition to the SAFE Act, which may have been the very thing that put me on the map early on in my political career. And I was fiercely debating that, trying to protect our Second Amendment rights. And if people look back to YouTube, I was debating heavily with Joe Lenthal. Joe Lenthal just got defeated in a Democrat primary because, as liberal as Joe is, he's not liberal enough. He's not crazy enough for the current crop of maniacs that are running for office on the Democrat side. So I'm happy to be here and answer any questions, give whatever insight I can to what's going on up there.
Well, I thought to invite you on the show after reading a few more of your tweets. I mean, I frequently retweet your content, but it is refreshing to see someone in elected office that's willing to call out sacred cows. I mean, there's been this, you know, Andrew Cuomo is untouchable mentality among some in elected office of all parties, that they're afraid to cross paths with a tyrant. And, you know, when I became chairman of the party last year, I said, we're done playing patty cake in the Republican Party of the state of New York. We are going to take the fight to this governor and his regime and the wackadoos that run our state capitol every single day. And I am happy to be kind of back out on the road, traveling around and talking about these issues out in the communities again, not just through the computer screen. Our trip to Rochester yesterday couldn't have gone better. But Steve, you know, give us a little of your insight as to what you've been through this COVID-19. You know, you've worn the hat of county executive, obviously a lot of emergency management responsibilities. And what's the interaction been like with Team Cuomo?
Yeah, well, you know, this we say it's almost been like Groundhog Day, and I think any of us in elected office at any kind of leadership level we're dealing with much the same thing that everyone else is dealing with. But for us, it's almost like Groundhog Day. It's been the same day over and over since March when we got our first positive case here in the county, which was March 17th. It was St. Patrick's Day. So it's been kind of an all hands on deck. However, operating with a skeleton crew, as all counties were. So we really, I think, responded well in Rensselaer County, you know, protected our one county-run nursing home. I think that's a shining example of what I did to stand up against this tyrant of a governor and his evil, and I think it was evil personified, that order that forced nursing homes to accept positive COVID residents or patients from hospitals. I read that, immediately called Van Rensselaer Manor, which is our county-run, county-owned home, said, you will never, ever obey that order, ever. Not one day will you accept a positive COVID. And on top of that, what gets lost sometimes is people forget that not only did they force them to take positive COVID, they forbid them from testing anybody coming in. That's something else that we did. I said, you are going to test everybody before they arrive. Those two actions, I believe, save lives. We've had 0 deaths at the manor, thank God, from COVID. And we protected them the way they should have been protected statewide. So, and we know the result. It's at least what they'll admit to is 6,300 or 6,500. The real numbers are probably double that because they began to do what they always do, which is cook the books, because they didn't like what was getting out there. So, you know, we've handled it really well. It's been a challenge for all of us as our sales tax revenue plummeted. But through my administration, we've been very focused on fiscal responsibility, like all Republicans should be. We built up our surplus by about $15 million last year. And in fact, we led the state in sales tax revenue growth last year. We averaged an 8.4% sales tax revenue growth when the state average was 4.2, which was good, but 8.4 certainly double that. So that served us really well as we go forward into some serious headwinds, largely caused by Andrew Cuomo's fiscal incompetence. We're going to be able to weather the storm probably better than most will because of what the steps we've taken over the past couple of years. So it's been an interesting journey, and you know, like you said, you were happy to get on the road, get back to a little bit of normalcy. That's what we're striving to do now every day, is get back to some semblance of normalcy.
That's right. Have you spoken with Governor Cuomo on the phone during any of this?
No, and I can tell you, for anybody watching out there, this governor, throughout the entire crisis, and many of my tweets a while ago were about that he never once addressed the county executives. He never got on the phone with NYSAC. Now, to his credit, Comptroller DiNapoli did, and you know, had a good back and forth conversation. Senator Schumer did. Got back, you know, we were going back and forth on some federal issues. So the senator addressed us, the comptroller addressed us, even the attorney general got on and addressed us. But this governor never did, until maybe me, but some others as well, shamed him into it. And then he gets on for one call. It was about a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago. And it wasn't even a back and forth. It was a lecture, how he was going to lecture us about how we had to do a better job. the county executives are the ones that have been keeping this train on the tracks throughout this whole crisis. It is the counties that took up and ran with this thing and had to keep things going, because the state was virtually absent for a lot of this stuff. They were not supplying us. They were telling us, you need to supply the hospitals. Okay, but you need to supply us. I said, you guys figure that out. They were okay with some of the PPE stuff, but then there were times where they weren't. So there was just complete lack of communication, which is especially galling when you have a governor running around the country trying to act like the conquering hero when he's not even communicating with those of us that are on the front lines. So he probably was a little more forthcoming with some Democrat county execs, but certainly not with me, and not with NYSAC, not with the Association of Counties.
I will say that for a guy that represents himself as his hands-on field general, I found it in private conversations with several of the county executives when they told me that they had not spoken directly to the governor, and these were big county executives.
Right.
I found that just mind-boggling. I mean, to think that you're not calling to see what's going on the front lines, and it gets you into the psyche of where this governor is, where it is, I'm going to sit in this tower and tell all the plebes what's going on and what they can do and what they can't do. I have been calling for weeks for the legislature to get back to work, repeal these emergency powers so they can be co-equal branches of government again. They need to do so because they bring the unique perspective of representing a local community. And, local government, I find, is obviously the best government because it's closest to the taxpayers. And, you've been an assemblyman representing, citizens in a handful of counties. You've now been their executive for 4 years. I mean, what do you think is, other than the nursing home, which is the obvious, most tragic, devastating mistake, what would you say as it affected your job? What is the biggest mistake that this administration's made so far?
Yeah, well, one of the biggest problems was definitely the lack of communication, but the way that transpired and showed itself on almost a daily basis was through his briefings, where many of us would be sitting here shaking our heads going, what did he just say? And then our phone would ring off the hook for 5 or 6 hours throughout the day as constituents are calling, what does this mean? What are we supposed to do? So what he does is, you've all seen this. He bloviates, he lectures, he tries to lull people with a hypnotic up and down of his voice. That's all a technique that he's doing. And he tries to lecture you and browbeat you. So he'll throw out these directives, and then his staff is running around frantically for 5 or 6 hours trying to craft an executive order that actually matches the insanity that he just threw out there. That wreaked havoc throughout the counties on a almost daily basis as he kept doing it over and over and over. So rather than collaborate, I always say leaders lead. But one of the things the leaders got to do is, you take the blame, but you share the credit. He's exactly 180 degrees from that. He does not do that ever. He takes all the credit and none of the blame ever. So there was no collaboration. There was no, what I would have done is get the county executives together on a call like this and say, guys, what are you seeing out there? What are we doing good? What are we doing wrong? How can I help you? It was none of that. And that was probably one of the biggest issues that we faced on a daily basis, was the ever-changing, conflicting directions. And you saw it, everybody saw it in the so-called phases, which I don't know what phase we're in now, phase 307, I don't know. So we got to phase 1, and he pulled the plug here in the capital region by saying, out of the blue, oh, hey, your hospital numbers are up. That was on one of our control room calls. Dan McCoy, county exec in Albany, myself, others are going, what are you talking about? Your numbers are way off. Rather than admit that their hospitalization numbers were wrong, they wouldn't admit that. They backed us off for 5 days, slowed us down, and then came back and said, oh, the numbers look better. Numbers didn't look better. We just forced them to count the correct numbers. So that was phase 1. Phase 2, within 24 hours out in your region, central New York, Finger Lakes was ready to open. What does he do? Oh, no, they can't open. He does this on a radio show. They can't open until I have my so-called international experts review the data. That came out of the blue. So there was always it's almost like the analogy I've used is like Charlie Brown. You go to kick the football and Lucy pulls it away. That's how this guy got it. It's maddening.
Whatever expands his grip and his power. I mean, now you read stories this morning that potato chips or crackers are no longer good enough for bar owners to sell a beer with.
Yeah.
I mean, this, because you're safe once you have a plate of French fries in front of you from COVID. But if
Right.
you don't have the crackers, that's not safe enough. And it is just very frustrating. I mean, and when what people are talking about in every conversation I have right now is the governor's trip to Georgia. Now he looks like he's auditioning for presidential politics to me, maybe hoping that everyone figures out that Joe Biden doesn't, know that he's alive and, can be substituted in at the 11th hour here. But, you have the governor that flies to Georgia on a dime, takes what I presume is taxpayer-funded PPE, supplies, what have you, to the city of Savannah, Georgia. Mind you, this is a state that's open, in full phase,
Yep.
And apparently pledges aid. Now, I don't know where in the state constitution that a governor is permitted to send financial aid from our coffers to a city in another state, in another region of the country. But would love to hear a textbook Steve McLaughlin response to this.
Yeah, well, I would say there's probably about 50 or 60 tweets over the past day from me. And if anybody's not following me, it's a party on Twitter. Sometimes it's at SteveMCNY, where I do let it fly. I let him have it as I see fit on a daily basis. He doesn't like that much, but too bad. So I don't think it's constitutional. None of that money was appropriated. I don't know where he gets the authority or ability to do that. Now, I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but I hope that there is one on that can begin to push this issue, because it may be an impeachable offense. Not that this legislature, as gutless as the Democrat majority is, will ever stand up to him. But I don't know that that's a legal thing to do. He's also paying for a test site. That's the other thing. He's paying for a test site to be two of them to be set up in Georgia. And I think I heard there was one in Texas as well. Now, keep in mind, in April, on a daily basis, I was screaming on the news, on Twitter, on Facebook, live with my Facebook update saying we need a test site in Rensselaer County. And the snarky response that I get from his spokesperson, if you will, was, well, this is just politics and consider the source. So at the time when the people he represents needed a test site, New York City was certainly the epicenter of what was going on, but we were having problems of our own, and every region was. He ignored us, and now he expends our money. I love the people of Georgia. We love all Americans, but they have a state government for a reason, just as we do. So I don't think that this guy is acting on legal grounds. We'll see what happens going forward, but it's very bothersome to me. I mean, we need help here. And keep in mind, he's expending money after digging us into a $6 billion hole that grows by the day because he doesn't have the courage to open up this economy. And he is going to absolutely hammer the municipalities of New York, counties, towns, villages. He's going to hammer us, but yet he's expending our money, not only in Puerto Rico, but in Georgia and possibly Texas as well. But notice, only in Democrat cities, only in like Savannah. It's outrageous, and this guy is a narcissist. It's all he does is try to feather his own nest and make himself look good at all costs.
It's you could also go on the state website, if you didn't know, Steve, and go buy yourself a poster that commemorates his journey. They forgot a couple landmarks on the poster.
Yeah.
I don't know how this is legal, but his campaign funded it, but it's being sold supposedly at cost on the state website, newyork.gov, where you can go buy a Cuomo commemorative poster. Maybe for a couple bucks more, he might actually sign it. I don't know. But he seemed to miss a few of the landmarks on his mountain journey. Even his daughters are on there, the boyfriends listed. But what's not on there are the 12,000 plus nursing home deaths.
Yeah. There's no coffins on that poster.
Yeah, there's no, rest in peace, or there's no skull and crossbones for the deadliest effect of any state in America. Yet, he thinks he belongs on Mount Rushmore after this. I understand, if he wants to, he auditioned to have a show apparently, and he thought he was a healing soother. but we still have the most people that are buried in the ground now because of COVID-19.
Yep.
Even with all, he wants to spike the football about what's going on in states like Florida and Texas and California right now. They're not seeing the deaths. Why did we
They are
see
not. No, I look at them daily. I look at states every single day. If you just Google COVID cases by state, you're going to see a great listing. You can pull up every single state. You know, Florida, Texas, and California, all bigger than us. And we have about 10 times the death that they do. So, you know, and he's blamed everybody. Now he's actually blaming those other states, saying, well, they're going to bring it back to New York. He completely forgets the fact that he helped turn this loose across the country because he absolutely refused to act early. He did not recognize what was going on. He would not shut down New York City. All it would have taken was 2 to 3 weeks of quarantining New York City, Westchester, and Long Island. You would have helped contain this. He's now helped spread it nationwide. And this is, I mean, I shake my head at some of the madness. It's like living in a parallel universe, watching this guy. You know, truly the emperor has no clothes, but so few people around him, in fact, nobody around him has the nerve to tell him that. You really shouldn't be out there spiking the football. You lead the nation in cases, you lead the nation in deaths, and you killed thousands upon thousands of seniors in nursing homes because of what you did. And you're too much of a coward to own up to that and admit what happened.
And meanwhile, he goes to Georgia, no mask on, and he's hugging people.
Yeah.
Yet family members can't go see their relatives in the hospital. You know, people died alone, and they deserve better. I mean, that's what makes me just sick here. This do as I say and not as I do mentality.
Oh, yeah.
He uses every one of these briefings to attack our president, and yet the president brought every damn resource that was asked for to the state of New York. We put 1,200 hospital beds in New York Harbor. There was more Army Corps of Engineer hospital beds put in this state than probably the rest of the country combined. And they sat empty while people died in nursing homes and infected others. I mean, there needs to be, and I don't know what you think about this, a 9/11 style commission report about what decisions happened in what order and who was held accountable to blame. Because there's, you know, yes, I'll grant you that many of those people were probably towards the end of their lives, but they deserved a more dignified end to their life than they got.
Oh, yeah, then there's no question. There needs to be a federal investigation. I'm hoping Steve Scalise, he seems to be on it. You've got to get people down in front of Congress, including Cuomo. I'd get him right under oath. Get Zucker under oath and find out what the heck went on, because you're right. Those folks were elderly, but a lot of those folks probably had a few more years left of decent life. And just what went on there was just so outrageous. You know, keep in mind, remember too, as he's screaming and wailing away, you pick who's gonna die. This guy wouldn't use the comfort. He didn't use the Javits Center. And he threatened, if you recall, to take our ventilators upstate by force. He was going to send in the National Guard and take us. He never said, hey, can we get some of these? We might need them. It was none of that. It was, I'm taking them. And how dare you stand up to me? He needed 10% of what he actually was screaming about. And he should have had those on hand already. In fact, was warned about that back in 2015 and, of course, ignored the warnings. So it's been just one incompetent thing after another.
Yeah, inconvenient truths. Well, I mean, we can go back and forth. This nursing home thing you go on for 3 hours about. But let's talk about some of the other, you know, failed policy. Another thing people are talking about is obviously the crime wave that's going on in this state. And the bail reform really made all this possible. When you go before COVID, I know myself and many others, and no matter what region of the state you went to, the bail reform and discovery reform was the number one topic on the street. Cuomo's numbers had tanked. The state legislature was backpedaling and even discussing, you know, tweaks. They did some very cosmetic tweaks in the budget to this, gives a little bit more leeway to judges, but, you know, this is all directly tied. You see the spike in crime. You have the city of Troy in your county. I'm sure that is, you know, giving you some issues. But you were very outspoken on the bail reform issue as it was being debated in the budget in the state legislature 2 years ago. What do you think, we're dealing with here as we see basically lawlessness in the streets in New York City? We're becoming a national laughingstock. We've disrespected cops, and we have a crumbling quality of life because of it. But I'm interested in your take in the capital region, especially as it involves, your dealings with the Troy Police Department.
Yeah, well, Troy Police Department, a lot of friends on that force, and very big fans of theirs, and we respect them greatly here in the county. Sometimes that doesn't translate with the city administration as much, but we respect them greatly, and we certainly back the blue in this county. I think the bail reform, whether it's Portland, Oregon, or Chicago, or New York City, anytime you have Democrats running a city with these permissive policies where there's no consequences for really virtually anything, you have people beating up police officers. Think about that. And they're out with no bail, and they know it. So the criminals are smart enough to know when there's no consequences, and they will push the envelope and push the envelope. And it is getting people hurt, and it is getting people killed. And it needs to come to a stop. And I do think, though, that right-thinking Americans and New Yorkers, whether they're Republican or Democrat, are looking at this saying, this is not how we're going to live. This is not how I want to raise my kids. Crossgates Mall in Albany had a shooting in the middle of the day yesterday. Shots were fired inside the mall. It is reckless. It is anarchist behavior. It is funded and pushed by, the far left, George Soros and Antifa and that whole crowd. As you said at the beginning, is intent on dismantling this country. And you've got to, the one thing I hashtag a lot on Twitter was stand up New York. New York has got to stand up and push back and say enough is enough. And, the way we win, we know we're outnumbered as Republicans. We shouldn't be, because our ideas are the right ideas. But the way we're going to capture back from the town level all the way up to the governorship is by engaging with those conservative type Democrats and saying, you've got to look at what's going on. You can no longer blindly say, I'm a Democrat, I vote Democrat, because I don't care whether you like them or don't like them, whatever. Their policies are enabling this. You could have the nicest assemblyman and senator in the world, but if they voted for this nonsense, they've got to go. And we have got to get back to our roots as New Yorkers, which is common sense leadership. It can't just be, give everything away and hope for the best. We're getting people hurt and killed out there, and I hope people are recognizing that. And I think they are.
Yeah, I think is another issue where people are detached from the reality of the constituencies they represent. A radical left perspective drove the train on this. The governor knuckled under because he's afraid of primaries. And we have disastrous policies that affect every town, village, and community in the state. Yep. So, we don't see any appetite for reform. We don't see any support coming for police in this state. And that's what's on the ballot this year. And that's why you need to get out and you need to support our candidates for Assembly, our candidates for Senate. I was a critic of the Senate majority for years. I know Steve certainly was. But
only when they did the wrong thing.
Honestly, I think this has been we didn't know how good we had it being such a blue state, that stop sign prevented things like this. Now with no stop sign, no speed bump, they can just roll over whatever they want to do. And they've crushed.
Yeah.
Steve, my perspective on our state is still, no matter if it's COVID, crime, whatever, our greatest crisis long haul is the loss of our people. And so many, we're going to have a census that was conducted in the middle of a pandemic. God knows what that's going to look like. Yep. We were on the verge of losing 2 seats in Congress to begin with. I think that's almost a certainty at this point. So now New York will probably fall to, we're definitely the 4th most populous state, but, our representation continues to slide. That's going to affect upstate in particular. But this hemorrhaging of population isn't just an upstate thing anymore. Now you're seeing it in the suburbs, and you're particularly seeing the 5 boroughs. people where they're concerned about, life during COVID and the challenges that living in the city presented because of COVID, but now the unrest, the lack of safety and security.
Yeah.
That is crippling. And we're going to lose people. And interested in your perspective on, where you see population growth or loss in your county in Rensselaer.
Yeah, I think I'm interested as well, because it's certainly a challenge to do a census in this environment. We are seeing some rapid growth in real estate prices because people are fleeing the city. Now, I don't want them taking their politics with them up here, right? We don't want that. But they are coming upstate, just as they did after 9/11, saying, I'm out of here. That does not bode well for the country or the state of New York, when New York City is going to get weaker and weaker and weaker. But we are seeing some shifting of that already. So I'm concerned about that. But you're 100% right about the exodus. The bigger issue is the exodus out of the state, where people just say, I love it, but I can't take it anymore. I can't afford to be here. I'm gone. And a lot of those, sadly, are productive Republicans that did their job, saved up some money, or were just plain wealthy to begin with, earned it, worked hard, and then they just said, I can't do this anymore. A famous example was Golisano when he left, right? He was an independent, but he took his money and left. Many others have done the same thing. I have friends that are pretty wealthy, sand and gravel guys that I live in Florida. I just visit New York because I can't afford it. So that's the biggest danger we face as a party, trying to stop that. And the only way you're going to stop that is to change New York's stars, to change New York's direction. And the only way that's going to happen is to get back to fiscal responsibility. So I'm worried as can be about it. We'll see what happens with the census. I think you're right. I think we fall to, well, we're already 4. We may fall to 5th or 6th the way this is going. So, and there's nothing, you look, we're the least free state in the nation. And this governor's a big reason why. The people don't want to live under a regime. They want to live in a democracy, in a free state. And more, New York is resembling a dictatorship. So it's troubling. And, we just get up every day here and try to fight the fight as best we can and try to just shine a light. That'd be the one message I have for all the electeds. Do not be afraid. What are you afraid of? He's not going to suddenly, if you stay quiet as a church mouse, he's still going to hammer you. He's still going to do whatever he wants. You might as well stand up, because like most bullies, when you hit back, he doesn't know much. He doesn't really know what to do. So that's the way I've approached him for 10 years now, is just stand up to him and push back when he's wrong. Sadly, that happens to be pretty much on a daily basis.
Well, that is true. We have some people that would like to join us and participate. We've got some people with their hand up. I'm going to start with someone I was with yesterday, a good friend, the Monroe County Republican Chairman, Bill Napier. Bill, you want to join us on the screen? Takes a minute to get everybody loaded up here. Hello, Bill. How are you?
Good afternoon. I want to first thank you, Chairman Langworthy, for coming to Monroe County yesterday and firing up the troops. And it was a great event, and got a great response on social media. And as you and I were talking about, the live stream that's carried by one of the local stations had a tremendous number of views on that. So we couldn't have been happier that you spent the time here and met with our candidates. They're ready to go. County Executive McLaughlin, I'm curious a little bit, and some of the questions that I had, you've already covered, particularly with regards to the nursing homes. One of the things that's been sticking with me, because I have a background in county government. I was an assistant county executive for the last 2 county executives here, and maybe NYSAC and some of the work that you've been doing with regards to the potential of a clawback by the governor with regards to the CARES Act funding that you received. Here in Monroe County, County Executive Bello received $129 million in CARES Act funding, which is far in excess of what he really can use at this point, because the pandemic didn't manifest itself in quite the way that it was anticipated. But the governor's made it quite clear that he wanted to get some of that money back, or it should have flowed first and foremost to him and that he would dole it out. He's postponed payments to aids to municipalities and is talking about a 20% reduction on those. I was wondering what you and maybe some of your fellow county executives, what your take is on that.
No, I think you summed it up real well, Bill. And it's something that we're watching like a hawk, trying to keep our eyes on and trying to prevent them from doing that. And let me give credit to Senator Schumer there, because we were in Washington before this really broke. I think it was, if I'm guessing, it was late February, early March. So everything was still semi-normal. And many of the county executives met directly with Senator Schumer and let him know this money was vital to us. So I give him credit; he came through for us there. But we're worried. I mean, it's one of those things where we're watching closely. I have my budget director across the hall from me, constantly watching, trying to protect what is ours. And the state, as you know, Bill, very heavy-handed and can sometimes just reach in and grab money from us. Or just hold back and not provide it. So it's a problem going forward, because you don't get out of a $6 billion hole that you dug, and then you continue to add to it by not opening up an economy when you should have. You don't get out of that lightly or easily. The problem is it's the counties and towns that are going to pay that price. So we're watching closely and hoping that we're successful in battling that.
Steve, what do you hear from the school districts when it comes to budgets? I mean, we last week had a forum about making sure our kids go back to school and discussing school reopening. I mean, eager to hear, what you're hearing from your school districts within, Rensselaer County and the Capital Region, and do you think that school district reopening for September is something that we can possibly pull off?
Well, I think we can and we should. I think these kids need to be back in school. I think the teachers union is going to be the biggest hindrance toward that, where they're going to try to push back on that. But I think that, the data, all this governor talks about is data and science. Of course, he doesn't follow it except for when he feels like it. But the data and science show that the kids, overwhelmingly in a gigantic way are fine. So I think they need to be back in school. I think that's vital. Our school districts are trying to figure it out. We do conference calls with them weekly with my superintendents around the county, and they're trying to figure it out. But the state education department, just like the rest of the Cuomo administration, comes forward with nothing. They don't give them any direction. They don't give them any guidance. So they're coming to us saying, "Hey, can you approve our plans?" We're happy to review them, but we can't really approve them. It's really incumbent upon the state. And you notice this is what the governor does. He'll say to 700 school districts, submit a plan, as if they're really going to read 700 of these plans. They're not. It's just inflicting confusion, dominance, and pain to try to keep everybody off balance so that they don't focus on the real problem, which is him and his administration. So I think that I think there's a way to get this done safely, but it's incumbent upon state health department and state education department to come forward with some clear guidance on what to do in the next 2 weeks, because it's almost August here. So it's time. So the school districts are worried just like the rest of us.
Very typical Andrew Cuomo move. We're going to not really give the go ahead. We've got here's 2,000 pages of guidance, but then we're going to really decide about a month out. So everyone's going to have to hurry up, scramble. The thing I'm hearing out of school districts is there's all sorts of money being discussed, but none of it to go to them to purchase plastic dividers, PPE. I mean, whatever they have to do to get reopened. And right. If you're, we had Mike Martucci, who's an expert on school transportation and a candidate for the state Senate as part of our forum last week. He said there's not enough school buses in the state of New York to make that mandate work on transporting our kids. So some of this is pie in the sky. Where someone that clearly has no practical connection to reality is going to just dream it up, and then we've got to make it happen. Meanwhile, the New York City subway runs every damn day.
Right. So, and I'm cynical enough to believe that what he's going to do is sometime around Labor Day, he'll wreak havoc again like he always does. You already see him starting to he went from praising New Yorkers to now starting to blame New Yorkers. You're not doing what I said. I'm going to shut everything down again. He is itching to shut down again because that gets us ever closer to the November election.
You're coming
right?
with the bars and restaurants right now. All the language is leading to the fact that he is probably going to drop the hammer again. You just see it. He's telegraphing the steps that first he's issuing those firm fatherly warnings. Now he's taking. I just saw a headline come across that he told young New Yorkers, and listen, young people do have to use their heads in this. They can get the virus, they can give it to their parents or grandparents. Obviously, we all have to be vigilant, but his line today to get on the news was, young people, it's not time to fight for your right to party. How about just letting small business people survive? That's the first and foremost thing. Instead, he wants to break up college parties.
Well, and also trust them to do the right thing. Trust the business owners and the people to do the right thing, and don't put a blanket over everybody. If you have some bad issues, address those.
Right. Weed out the bad actors, and everybody else that's following the rules should get to go. If you want to raise your hand, there's a function to ask a question on camera, or you can type a question in. We are joined now by an incredible candidate for Congress, from the Capital Region, taking the fight to Paul Tonko, another do-nothing member of Congress that half of this time during COVID has used the proxy vote function to give his vote on behalf of upstate New York to a member from New York City whose district has nothing in common with his. But I know that's going to change in November with Liz Joy, someone we're going to have as a guest on one of these programs very soon. Liz, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much. Hi. Well, first of all, I'm so glad to be on with both of you and everybody on the call. And I'm especially glad to be in District 20, which Steve McLaughlin is obviously the county executive there in Rensselaer. So it's great to see him. I see his tweets every day, all day. I'm very thankful because I watch him literally get up every single morning and be very courageous and bold and hit back at Governor Cuomo, which is exactly what we need in New York State. One of the things that especially meant a lot to me, to my family, because we have an elderly member in a nursing home, not here in our state, but in Florida, was to watch Steve literally push so hard for Rensselaer County people that they got to go and see their loved ones in the nursing homes. I mean, that to me was somebody that's really fighting for the people of his district. And I know that it meant a lot to them. It meant a lot to me here in District 20. And my question really is, because I hear from people all the time, all over the 5 counties here in District 20. What can we do to encourage other executives to be able to push for allowing people to visit in these nursing homes? I get people on a regular basis coming to me, and as a candidate, I don't have that power, but I need to be able to respond, to be able to help them with what they can say and what they can do, going to their own county executive and talking to them about being able to get in there and see their elderly. My husband takes care of elderly patients all the time. And one of the things that Governor Cuomo is not talking about is the huge curve that has now risen from the people who are severely depressed, who are giving up and dying because they can't see their families. And this is an enormous curve where people are giving up and dying. So Steve, what can I do? What can I say for to some of these people and to help them be able to get in and see their loved ones?
Yeah, thanks, Liz. So that was, I think there was a couple acts of defiance that I've taken. The first was, as we talked about earlier, defying that executive, that order from the health department from Zucker and Cuomo about accepting positive COVID. But the other big act of defiance was a couple of weeks ago where I said, enough is enough. And I had been asking for a month on these control room calls, visits in nursing homes. What are we doing? Let's go. We need guidance. We got to do it. We got to do them outside. It's warm weather. You got PPE, you got masks, you got sanitizing. These people need to see their families because Liz is 100% right. They're getting depressed and they begin to give up, and then they present in a certain way where they've just given up, and then they decline and they pass. Not only did I not want death on my conscience because I didn't do enough to stand up and push back, I also didn't want anybody passing away out of depression. That would weigh on me as well. So I said, enough's enough. We set up stations with clear plastic screens and separation, 6 feet separation, and we have sanitized before and after. We even have phone number right there where we'll give the resident a phone because some of them are hard of hearing, and the people are right there. They can dial and talk directly. They got to see these people face to face. They need to see their families. So it's tough for me, Liz, because you're saying, what can we tell other people? I come from a perspective of I'm just not putting up with it. I know what the right thing to do is, and I act. And I guess what I would push upon or press upon other people is you've got to convince these other executives that it's okay to act. You are not a servant of Andrew Cuomo. In fact, he works for us. He works for the people, just as I work for the people, just as you're going to work for the people in Congress. It's not my job to blindly follow. And far too many of these executives have blindly followed his awful orders and dictates, and people have died because of it. So I would just continue to tell the people out there, you've got to get up close and personal, not aggressive, not mean, but get connected with your county executive and your legislators and say, you have got to act. You have to recognize that you're killing people by trying to protect them is what's happening. You're going overboard in keeping them sheltered. And as a result of that, they're dying. It doesn't make any sense. So it's hard for me to give you one single thing to say, do this. A lot of it has to do with people have just got to have the courage to stand up and push back.
Very good. I think our next guest is going to be Brian Rusk. Or no, we got Jonathan. Jonathan is next, and then we'll see Brian.
Hi.
Hi, Jonathan. Welcome.
Hi. How you doing?
Good.
Yeah, I live in New York City, and and I'm wondering. It's an unfortunate reality. That we're a minority here in New York City in particular. What would you say for those for someone who thinks like a Republican but registers to vote as a Democrat, simply so he or she can vote in Democrat parties and stop the election of radical leftists?
Yeah, I can understand the strategy down there, Jonathan, because, sadly, we're that outnumbered. So, I mean, you get a chance there to cast your vote, in the primary, which is important to try to stem the tide a little bit. So I can kind of understand that strategy. We'd rather have you on the Republican side, but just make sure, of course, in the general, I know you all come back home to us, which is good. But Nick, what do you think? I can kind of see the strategy of doing that.
It's I was county chairman of Erie County prior to service, as state chairman. City of Buffalo is not all that far off demographically from the city of New York. We had it was an 8-1 Democrat to Republican. New York City was only 7-1 Democrat to Republican. Many people were in the same boat. They registered Democrat to have a say in city government elections, but whether it's county, state, whatever, they followed and were practicing Republicans. So I'd call them, I suppose, dinos. If everyone wants to use acronyms. But, they're out there. It's the silent majority is the way I look at it. There's no one controls what you do when you go in to vote. And we're trying to provide you with choice and options, and we need to do better in the 5 boroughs. We are doing better in the 5 boroughs this year, having candidates. And there's areas that, it's not realistic to expect a victory, but there's districts that we're going to fight and carry the banner. And we have taken this party. I traveled to all 62 counties last year. It's a big state. It's a diverse state. We need to make the state look more like, or make the party look more like the actual state, and welcome people in of all party affiliations. So we are just trying to fight to get to common sense. This is not some right-wing ideological agenda we're trying to achieve. We're just trying to make the state livable again for the average Joe that's out there trying to pay his bills, pay your taxes, to put your kids through school, maybe have a few bucks left over to go on vacation. Those are the people that we have to provide a voice to. to be out there fighting for the little guy, the taxpayer that has been forgotten and is certainly forgotten by this radical leftist bunch. And, you know, I look at a tweet yesterday, Steve, that we got that a lot of people responded to, but it said, cancel rent, cancel mortgage, cancel student debt. This is the mentality. This was one of the squad members. I think it was Presley. And the message you're sending to our youth and our kids, free, free, free. The government will take care of it for you. Don't worry about making lousy decisions. Don't, live in the moment. Don't live for the future. Just do whatever the hell you want to do, because the government's going to erase anything bad that you decide on.
Yep.
We all know and are old enough to know that that doesn't work out that way, that there are consequences, and these socialist regimes have all toppled. I mean, I remember back in the Bush years, one of our big adversaries was that dictator down in Venezuela because he was riding high on oil money. Yep. Well, he died, and then the country collapsed in on itself. They're fleeing that country. No one's ever trying to break into these socialist countries and sneak across their borders like they are ours.
Yep.
So we have to fight like hell against this mentality. It's permeating normal culture. It used to be fringe, and now it's become normalized. And that's the scary thing. That's what's on the line in 2020. And that's why we need not just your vote, but everyone to get out and vote that thinks like you do. So next we've got Brian.
Can I say one thing that while you're bringing up the next, the one thing, Jonathan, to keep hope on down there in New York City is if you look at Sheldon Silver, Tarnished Silver, I call him, who's finally on the way to jail, long overdue. He would win election and be the Speaker of the Assembly with like 6,000 votes. So yes, there's a lot of Democrats down there, but it doesn't mean they show up to vote, and their turnout is not particularly strong. Last time I ran for Assembly, I was the #1 vote getter in the entire state. So our people upstate tend to show up. That's something we need to push, impress upon people, that do not for a second think, oh, my vote doesn't matter because we're outnumbered. They want you to think that. There may be more population there. It doesn't mean that their turnout equals that. And if we can get people so fired up that they cannot wait to go vote, that's how we're going to win. We can outnumber them. For example, the past 2 gubernatorial elections, Rob would be in his 2nd term right now, and or Mark would be governor right now if every gun owner had showed up to vote. So I constantly tell people the biggest thing, you've got to vote. It's a sacred honor. It's a sacred duty. You've got to vote.
It's not enough to share memes on Facebook. It's not enough to just sit on Twitter and retweet people. You have to get out and vote, and you have to get your family out to vote. I mean, you always hear these stories of people that lost by a handful of votes, and close intimates of theirs didn't vote. Donors of theirs didn't vote. These are things that we take for granted. The Democrats are taking nothing for granted. I'm hearing from boards of elections across the state telling me that they have a massive influx of Americans abroad, that there's a movement and an organized paid effort to get Americans in probably 98% of them are liberal do-gooders that are living in France and living all throughout Europe in far-flung places to come and vote. And if they claim that they plan to return to the United States, they don't just get a presidential ballot. They get a local ballot too.
Yep.
I know in Erie County, they're getting 10 applications a day from foreign countries.
Wow.
I mean, this is the reason they go for our elections isn't to make things more fair. And the reason they want to make all these changes is they think they're going to curb stomp the Republican Party.
Yeah, and you look at Andrew Cuomo in his entire tenure, has he done one thing to make your life more free, other than the freedom to kill babies up to the moment of birth? That he did, which is horrific. And other than that, what has he done to make you more free? I mean, nothing. So those folks that are overseas could very well come home to a United States that they no longer recognize if this anarchy is allowed to continue.
It used to be we were just talking about socialized medicine. Now you're talking about just a full-blown socialist republic. Absolutely. It's on the line. This is not hyperbole, folks. This is on the line in this election. That lives in our Congress right now. Brian,
Yep.
I'm ready for
Hey,
your
Brian.
rant.
Yes, thank you, Nick. I'm the Amherst Republican chairman, and I thank Nick Langworthy for his decisive, strong leadership, and thanks County Executive McLaughlin for calling out Cuomo on a constant basis. Andrew Cuomo is a phony hypocrite, telling all Georgians that if they come to New York, they have to stay in one room for 14 days. But Andrew Cuomo, hypocrite in chief, goes to Georgia and returns with no quarantine. It's Cuomo, do as I say, not as I do. A very arbitrary, know-it-all, smartest man in the room governor. The state of New York under King Cuomo has a $20 billion deficit. Why didn't Cuomo furlough non-public safety state employees for 4 months, saving billions of dollars? Yet Cuomo gives supplies to another state while we have a $20 billion New York State deficit. Cuomo's arbitrary, show-off, loud 14-day quarantine for 30 states will cost New York State billions in lost trade, vacationers, and retail sales. With 6 feet distancing and masks, all quarantines should be canceled now. Cuomo and Trudeau should open up the U.S. border to New York State today for retail, trade, vacationers with social distancing and masks. New York State is shut down and it will take years to bring back. Cuomo was all show and no go for jobs, economic development, and personal freedom. Thank you.
Brian never holds back. Thank you, my friend.
Oh, that's great.
He's a warrior for the party.
That's beautiful. Can't argue with any of that. Well,
Well,
done.
Last, I will just visit a written question or comment from Beth Evers. Does Cuomo seem to have any idea how he's destroying this state? Businesses, wealthy, productive citizens, and employers are rightly choosing to leave this state and take their money with them. It's only creating a wasteland with little ability to regain lost ground. What does he think we will have left to dictate to? Is Cuomo really that uninformed as to the real life consequences to poor decisions in leadership? I mean, she brings up a great point. If you're a place looking, not that there's a lot of new businesses forming in the middle of a pandemic, but if you're making the decision as to where to place a plant, where to create, a small business, are you ever going to look at New York?
Yeah, very, very difficult to see anybody doing that without what we've all seen, which is just massive over-the-top incentives to try to get them here, but essentially bribe them to come in because we have such an unfriendly business atmosphere. I think on the one hand, he knows full well what he's doing because he's kowtowing to the ultra far left, and he's counting on the rank and file Democrats to just come along for the ride. So on the one hand, I think he knows what he's doing. On the other hand, I think he's just completely ignorant to it. And he's so narcissistic and so arrogant that he thinks he can do whatever he wants and survive it. And I think, or have the state survive it. I think one of the things that appears clear to me that he's doing is he wants everybody to kind of pay no attention to the fact that we're in a massive $6 billion hole in the best economy anybody alive had ever seen. He doesn't want you to pay attention to that. So rather than try to fix that, he doesn't even address it. He proceeds to dig the hole deeper, and so he can beg for a bailout. That would be bad enough if he then said, listen, we've learned our lesson. We're going to change our ways. If they give him a massive federal bailout, he's going to get right back on the backhoe and start digging the hole all over again because it's all he knows. And if people go back and take a look, I mentioned this on Twitter, this is the second time that he's destroyed the economy of New York State, the country, and in fact, the world. He's helped pay apart. When he was HUD commissioner, HUD secretary, if you could fog a mirror, he wanted you to have a mortgage. And it dismantled the entire world's economy, destroyed everything, took us 10 years to build it back up. We finally get the train rolling again, thanks to President Trump. Incredible economy. And what do? They have to dismantle it all over again. This time through an overblown COVID crisis, which a virus that has, it's not saying it's not serious, but the survival rate's about 99.8% and getting better by the day as deaths go down and down. So this is all this guy knows how to do is destroy, spend your money, spend government money, and destroy everything he touches.
You heard it from him directly. thank you, County Executive Steve McLaughlin. Look forward to having you back again soon. Keep up the great work and keep those tweets coming, my friend.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks, everybody.
And thank you to everyone that took the time to be with us today. This has become a great institution for our party, a way for us to have two-way dialogue and communicate, get our message out across the state while so many things are shut down. If you like what you hear today, please take a moment, go to nygop.org and make a donation if you can afford to. With us having to scale back, not having our in-person functions, it's been very difficult to replace some of the income that the party traditionally would have. We still have expensive races to run this fall, races for the state Senate, for the Assembly, for Congress. We have to make sure that we have and restore two-party government to the people of the state of New York. So please take a moment, give a few bucks if you can afford to, so we can keep our mission going. And the Democrats just call the Union Hall, the money gets wired right over. We don't have that luxury. We are counting on patriotic people like yourself to keep us in business and keep our voices heard in this state. So thank you for all you do. We'll be back next Thursday at noon, and we look forward to seeing you then. Take care.